Hey, what's going on, guys? With our Road to Final Fantasy series finally just starting off, I wanted to do something kind of fun that I can look back on throughout my journey through the series and kind of come back to and adjust. Today, my plan is to rank all of the numbered entries in the Final Fantasy franchise on a tier list that I will be playing based on how I feel about them right now in this exact moment. So, some of these games I have played a unhealthy amount of. Some I've only played a little, and some I actually haven't even played at all. So I think it'd be really, really cool to kind of just go to and rank them, or go to a list and rank them right now, and see how I think the games are going to be, and revisit the list after every single game uh, to see if maybe I was too harsh on a rank or even too good on a rank. Readjust as well as kind of go into a little bit more detail about how I found that game. Before we get started here, I do just want to give the obvious warning that it is a tier list, so everything on it is completely opinion based. My favorite games might be your most hated games, and my most hated games might be your most favorite games, and there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. So if I put something in a bad spot for you, feel free to yell at me and let me know where you think it belongs, and we can always have a discussion about that later on. So with that said, let us finally jump into my Final Fantasy tier list. So, we're going to start off here with the very first game in the entire franchise. We're going to start off with Final Fantasy, also known as Final Fantasy 1. So, with it being the original game in the series, none of the rest of these games would have come about without this original one. If it hadn't been good enough, we wouldn't have spawned sequels. Sure, maybe we would have had the games, but they wouldn't be titled as they are, and they wouldn't follow the same base theme that they do. It really all comes down to Final Fantasy was a wonderful game when it came out in 1987, and it was well beloved for its time. The problem I have with this game is not really even a problem. It's an older game, right? So it's very, very linear. There isn't really anything to speak of with the graphics. The story is very simple. This one I have beaten once or twice, so I am familiar with the story and some of the gameplay mechanics. So I think it would be pretty fair to take this one and put this somewhere in a low B, upper C tier. It's not a bad game, like I said. Without this game, all of these wouldn't exist. So I don't think it deserves to be in a poor tier. I think it definitely deserves to be right in the middle of the pack. Moving on to Final Fantasy II. So this sucker, this one I have beaten once. And that is not because it is a hard game by any means, but in my opinion, it is not a good game. How we had a game like Final Fantasy spawn a sequel that was this, I will never know. So it follows the basic simple story guideline. It too is an older game. It has the same pixelized graphics. It's a little bit more personable where we have names of the characters instead of naming our own characters necessarily. And the job system isn't as prevalent as it was in Final Fantasy 1. It trials a new system, which we'll get to when we get to Final Fantasy 2 in our series. But I'm not fond of the system. I'm not fond of the game itself. For me, this game goes in the D tier. To put a Final Fantasy game in a D tier, for me, it feels blasphemous because I adore this series so much. But, you know, some games got to go there. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have the tier. Final Fantasy III, on the other hand, is one of my most beloved games in this entire series. This game took the job system that Final Fantasy I had, and it made it much more. So this game has a couple of ports. It's developed a couple different ways to play over the many years since it's been out. My favorite port, and the port I played the most of, is the 3D remake port for the Nintendo DS originally. And to me, this is one of the most beautiful games in the series. The problem with this game is it is still very linear. There is no huge complexities in the story. It is a very simple light versus dark, good versus evil, that type of shenanigan. However, to me, this is a really fun game to play. I've beaten this game many times over the years, and I'm definitely looking forward to us getting back to it. With that said, I think it belongs in the A tier. I don't see that changing. It's not a perfect game. but it's definitely not a bad game at all. It's really, really good. Moving on, Final Fantasy IV. This was actually the very first Final Fantasy game that I played beginning to end completely on my own. I had had experiences with other games before that, but this is truly the one that really launched my love for Final Fantasy. It is a really, really good game, but it's not really perfect, if you know what I mean. So this one also has the same type of treatment that 3 did, where it develops a new type of system, or it works upon what they already had in the past. Final Fantasy IV takes your basic good versus evil, light versus dark story structure, and it finally starts to add a little bit of gray into the middle of the story. And for that, this game will always be one of the better Final Fantasies that I've ever played. The problem with this one is it remains linear, as you would expect with the times. Another thing that this game did that Final Fantasy III did is it actually has a 3D remake for the Nintendo DS as well, and that was actually the version I first played. So this one also, in my opinion, goes up into the A tier, but it does go behind Final Fantasy III for me, just due to the lack of being able to change the job, the lack of being able to do anything set from the exact linear part of the story. It's a good game. It's not the best game in the series, but it's definitely a really, really good game to play. Final Fantasy IV, The After Years. This game is one of the few that I've never played. So this is a sequel that takes place many years after the events of Final Fantasy IV end. The story follows the main character from 4's son as the direct protagonist, while also bringing a lot of the playable characters from the original game back into this game. Without ever having played this before, this will be the first game we put on the series where I'm not rather certain of its placement. I haven't heard much talk of it. A lot of people aren't super familiar with it, but I know that it is very a respectable game, and it follows the story from the original game while giving its own story. For that, we're going to put it in the B tier, and we are going to put it behind Final Fantasy I for now. This is one that I definitely foresee changing, simply because we haven't played it yet, and it'll be more accurate after we finish playing it. Final Fantasy V. If you like the job system, this is the game you should play. I actually haven't ever beaten this one, and that's not because it is a bad game per se, but there's always some reason or another that I stop playing it. I play it, and it makes me want to play something slightly more advanced, so I play the 3D copy of Final Fantasy III. That is usually how it happens, but the job system is also very respectable in this game. If we're comparing the original ports of Final Fantasy III to Final Fantasy V, then Final Fantasy V is definitely the game that originally restructured the job system into what we really know it as today, with the DS version of Final Fantasy III taking that a further step. I would really like to see this game remade, kind of get a treatment similar to what maybe 7 Remake, maybe a little bit less than 7 Remake received. Almost like what the Pokemon games likes to do with theirs. I'd like to see a complete remake of the game happen down the road, and that would be a brilliant game. With that said, I do think I'm going to put it in the B tier. I haven't beaten it, right, so I don't know the story that well. So I think it would be unrealistic for me to put the game any higher or any lower. I know it's a good game. I know what it revolutionized. I know what it stands for, but I don't know it well enough to do anything more. Final Fantasy VI. So, this is another game I haven't beaten, and to be completely honest with you, this is a game I haven't made it very far in. I don't know if it's good, I don't know if it's bad. I know that it follows multiple different storylines throughout the course of the middle of the game, and that can make it a bit hard to kind of follow. This was the first Final Fantasy game that featured multiple protagonists, as opposed to just your basic protagonist and then the assembled party with them. I've heard it's a pretty decent game. It's a lot of people's favorite games. When you look at any forums of, for Final Fantasy and you see how people feel about the series as a whole, you'll see them talk about 5 and 6 a lot more than most of the other games, with obviously the elephant in the room being excluded. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know the game. I know it's supposed to be good, but on the fact that I've tried to start it many times, I am going to put it in the C tier. This will be the first time in this series that we're doing that I played play it all the way. And I beat it, and I'm really, really hoping that when I beat it, that I can move it up, and I can have the same respect for it that most of the community does. Speaking of the elephant in the room, Final Fantasy VII. This game revolutionized this series. It isn't so far along to say that without this game, the entire franchise may not be what it is today. That's not to say it wasn't a big franchise before this, but this is what really brought this franchise front and center in the world of RPG gaming. There isn't an RPG gamer out there who doesn't know what Final Fantasy is, and Final Fantasy VII, most RPG players have played. This is a beautiful game. It is one of my favorite entries into the series. It is still rather linear, as most Final Fantasies and even JRPGs as a whole tend to be, but we take our idea of light versus dark and we throw it in the garbage in this one. And we have a lot of gray, a lot of in the middle, and a lot of kind of you're welcome to stand where you think you should stand, and it hits on some warlike things. It's a beautiful game. I don't really want to get too much into it when we're going to be playing it here on the channel, but I will say that this is going to be our first game into the S tier. And shocker, I'm a shill. I love the game. It's one of the most popular games. I can't help it. It's such a good game to me. I can't see me putting it anywhere but the S tier, and even when we replay it, I know it's going to stay there. There is no doubt in my mind that this is one of the best games in the franchise to me. Final Fantasy VII Remake came out a little bit ago now, a couple years back, and it's a good game. It is a really good game. It takes the base story from the game and it completely reshapes it and moves it, and it looks like the trilogy that Square is making out of it is going to be a beautiful, beautiful series. But it is going to be a different game to me, and because of that, I still have to just go off of the original, and this game is why I love gaming. So it can't be anything but S tier to me. Final Fantasy VIII. Any game that followed a game like Final Fantasy VII was going to have any problems possible performing as well. This game brought a brand new system into the game, the Guardian Force system, something that I'm not going to go over too much here because it is just a tier list video. But it was an entirely new system, and it hit with mixed reviews for fans of the series. Some people love it, others not so much. I personally am not super fond of it, but I also haven't beaten this game. I've gotten about halfway through this game before, and I can't remember what made me stop. I don't think it was anything to do with the game. I think it was life stuff at the time, but it wasn't something that I really ever wanted to go back to. They recently did and by recent I mean a couple years, they did a kind of 3D revamp of the graphics and whatnot for the PlayStation and for Steam. And I look forward to playing it and having the opportunity to experience the game and hope to love it. But because of the Guardian Force system, I am going to put it in the C tier. I'm not super fond of the system, to be completely honest. I don't know the story super well, so it's hard to put it any higher than that for me. I do hope, as with 6, that we're able to move it up after we finish playing it. Final Fantasy IX. What a banger. The music is top tier. The characters are top tier. The story is all over the place. It's a good game. It brings another new system while going back to the basics with other parts of the game. The job system is like gone at this point, unfortunately. While characters still follow basic job paths, it's kind of done a little bit differently, and people are kind of set into what they can do. In Final Fantasy IX, the system they brought in was with the equipment, where you learn skills off of equipment before switching off different equipments. And I found that really cool. I found that really fun. It is a really, really good game. It's I look forward to playing it again, and that's really all I can say about that one. We're going to put it in A tier, but we're going to put it behind Final Fantasy III, above Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy X. This game is known to so many people throughout this community and other communities. It is a famous and infamous game. I really don't look forward to replaying the Tidus laugh. Those of you that know, you know. But but it is a good game. This kind of has like a skill tree vibe to it. That was the system they kind of introduced in this game, and because of that, it's a lot of fun. It definitely isn't the best game in the series, but it would be extremely disrespectful to put it any lower than A tier. It is a good game. It's got a good cast. It's got kind of good underlying themes in the game. I love it. It is a good game. We're going to put it in the A tier. We're going to put it above Final Fantasy IV, but below 9. This is a game that we could see change as we go through. We'll see how my feelings are after beating it again, after witnessing that ending again. Final Fantasy X-2. Here we have another sequel. So this game, I haven't actually beaten. I haven't even made it halfway through the game, and that's not to say it's a bad game. It's a different game. You would think that with it being a sequel of 10 that it would carry similar systems, and it has a few, but at the same time it is not. The only thing that makes it a sequel is the story base and the fact that it uses a couple similar playable characters. From what I've played, it's a good game. I'm not going to say it's not a good game. I look forward to finally beating it. The problem that I have with Final Fantasy X-2 is it does take multiple playthroughs to fully understand and complete everything. And that can kind of be a damper when it is a game that is as large and full as this game. However, I also know it has multiple endings. Because of all of this, we're going to put it in A tier. I know it to be a good game. I haven't beaten it yet. I anticipate that I will love it and it will go down as one of my favorites. We're going to put it at the bottom of A tier here, below 4, because it's hard to say exactly how it's going to go. Final Fantasy X-2 brings back the job system in the form of dress spheres, and for that, I really think I'll enjoy it, and it's quite possible we see this game rise to the top of A tier and potentially even the S tier. Final Fantasy XI. This was the first attempt that Square Enix took at making an MMO. The game is still alive. I think not many people play it anymore. Obviously, due to the fact that it is an MMO, we will not be playing it because that just wouldn't make sense for the series. I never played it. I think I was a bit too young to get into it when it came out. I didn't have anything necessary to be able to play it. So with that said, we're just going to leave it here and it can stay there. Final Fantasy XII. What a game. So many things change in this game. So many systems change in this game. And it's had so many remakes now. There's the International. There's the Zodiac job system. There's the multiple different ports to multiple different systems. It's a good game. It's a lot of people's most known game in this franchise, believe it or not. It is completely different from every other game in the franchise. It has its own individual niche. And because of that, it is a wonderful game. Have I beaten it? No. Have I been close? Yes. Why haven't I beaten it? It's easy to start grinding and forget why you're grinding and accidentally get too strong, making the rest of the game unfun. There are a couple life-changing glitches in this game, and some of them are very, very exploitable, especially at the beginning of the game, for a very specific weapon that is potentially the strongest weapon in the game to use that you can just grab and cheat through the rest of the game. We're going to put this in the B tier, but we're going to put it at the top of the B tier. I don't know if this one will change. This is either a long or a short game. It's got a good story behind it. It's got good underlying themes. It's a respectable game, but I don't think it has the same place in my heart that games like Final Fantasy 3 and 9 have. Final Fantasy 12, Revenant Wings. This is kind of a sequel while not being an exact sequel. This was a Nintendo DS game. I did play it back when it came out. Maybe not exactly when it came out. It was a good game. Nothing wrong with the game, but it was kind of a strategy game. It was different from anything else that we'd ever played. I can't record off of a DS, and I'm not really sure if there are any ports of it. Plus, it's maybe not the most entertaining to watch. The story doesn't really matter much to the original Final Fantasy XII, and it doesn't really fit the same template as everything else. So we're going to put it in will not be playing. I think even if I can find a way to play it, I don't think I'll be including it in our journey here. Final Fantasy 13. I have a lot to say about this game. I have very little to say about this game. If you let me, I could sit here and talk your ear off for hours about this game. We're not going to do that. Those of you who know me know that this is one of my favorite games ever created. to the point where I have branded a part of this game on my body. I love this game. I love the cast. I love the voice acting. Some call it very simple. Some call it very linear. To those people, I say bite me. Final Fantasy 13-2, a direct sequel to Final Fantasy 13, with the beginning of the game happening just a couple short years after the ending of Final Fantasy 13. This is a good one. This explores the main character from 13's little sister, and it takes a lot of the systems and themes from the first game, brings them into the second game, and expands on them and does a lot more. This is a really, really enjoyable game, and the story is what kind of brings this game down. It's kind of all over the place. It's hard to keep exact track of, and sometimes you're doing something and you don't know why you're doing it. If it wasn't for how the story plays out / doesn't play out, then this game would be an easy S tier, beating even its predecessor. But because the story is kind of crappy and there is a very, very, very disrespectful event at the very end of the game, we are going to put this in the A tier. We are going to put it right there, above Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy 13, Lightning Returns. This was the third entry into the trilogy of Final Fantasy 13. The first time that we had gotten a second sequel, or a sequel to a sequel in the franchise. This game had a lot of mixed reviews because a lot of people who played this game for the first time felt as if they were rushed. And that's definitely understandable without understanding the system, but with understanding it, you realize that there is no rushing, and that's just the nature of the game. And the reason for that specific nature of the game is this is a game that requires multiple playthroughs to completely get everything done, similarly to Final Fantasy X-2. The difference is this isn't a 40-50 hour game into a 40-50 hour game. This is a potential 20 to 30 hour into a 10 to 15 hour. And from there, it's stat maxing. What do you want to do? What super bosses do you want to be able to beat, and how quick do you want to be able to beat them? What difficulties do you want to play on? This game, I have platinumed on PlayStation 3 different times for 3 different accounts, and it is a game that I have played probably almost as much as I've played Final Fantasy VII, with it not being out for anywhere near as long. I think it would be a crime to put it anywhere other than S tier for me. I love the game. Such a good game. Lightning Returns, voice acting is amazing, the fights are great, the systems are great, that's all we'll say. Final Fantasy XIV. This is another online game. It initially came out as just Final Fantasy XIV Online, and then after it kind of, I don't want to say flopped, but it really struggled at the beginning. It was re-released as Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn, which is known as the first expansion, but also the base game. There are people still around who played the original game, and they can tell you stories about it. There are also more people that started in A Realm Reborn. I myself am one such person who started in A Realm Reborn. It is a really, really good game. For an MMO, it is a game that compares directly to games like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2. And it has its own systems and respectable parts of the game. However, yet again, due to the fact that it is an online game, an MMO, we will not be featuring it in our series. And then finally, Final Fantasy 15. There's a lot of things I could say about this game. We'll talk about this more when we get to it. There's many, many things that I'd like to say about this game. It is a good game. However, it's hard to not rush through it and get absolutely pub stomped at the end of the game. With that said, we're going to throw it into the B tier, and we're going to put it above 5 because the story is really, really good. But we're going to put it below 12 because it does kind of a real-time action combat similarly to 12 while being more fleshed out. But the story is just, it's another one where it's hard to follow. Similar to Final Fantasy 13 too. There is one more game that we don't have on here, and that's Final Fantasy 16. The game hasn't released yet. It comes out in June of this year. Due to how many games are in this franchise, we will be getting to that game in this franchise. Where do I expect that to be? I expect that to be up in the A tier for sure. The trailers look really good, but I know that the combat is very similar to Final Fantasy 15. We'll have to see if I'm right. We'll say A tier for now. Honorary A tier. And with that, that's what this tier list looks like now. Like I said in the intro, I look forward to revisiting this video, or rather this tier list, and seeing, was I right about how I originally ranked those? Is that really how I feel about them? And maybe would I change them? I hope you liked today's video. If you want to see more of stuff like this, feel free to follow my Twitter or subscribe to my channel here, because I put out a lot of Final Fantasy content. And I really, really want to share it with everybody that I can. With that said, I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.